Last episode, I decided to go on a bit of a rant around climate change and how people are reacting to climate change. And, I got a response from the person that I was talking about. If you didn't listen to the episode, go back to listen to the episode because I don't want to repeat it here. But, he was saying, hey, you know what, all those changes that people were saying, that's not happening. The changes that people predicted in the 1980s, it's not happening. It's different now. Well, I don't know what they're thinking, but it hasn't gotten better. It's gotten worse. And, we're going to talk about today what the prediction is for the 21st century or the 22nd century, 2100, because it doesn't look good. And certain places like the Hamptons are predicted to go underwater. So we're going to talk about why that is and what people can do about it and the problems with that on this episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Let's start the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. I'm your host, Andrew Lewin. And this is the podcast where you find out what's happening with the ocean, how you can speak up for the ocean, and what you can do to live for a better ocean by taking action. I want to welcome you to this episode because I did it the day after I normally release an episode on Monday. So it's actually Tuesday, and you're hearing this because I'm trying something new. I'm going to see if I can handle 5 days a week of episodes. But we're going to see how that happens. I might even turn that into a bit of a YouTube thing with Ocean Talk. But we'll just see what happens and where we go from there. But regardless, today we're going to be talking about sea level rise and climate change because, as I mentioned in the pre-intro, there's some people who still don't think that some of the changes that have been predicted will happen. It was kind of funny. I was away last week for my day job, and I was talking to somebody from my company who's, this young person who wants to, live life and enjoy the heat. They grew up in a place where there was heat, and they're over here in North America, and now they want to go somewhere hotter because, Canada gets cold at certain times of the year. And they wanted to be like, I want to go to Miami. And I was like, oh my gosh, Miami. And I think I may have kind of dampened the mood a little bit after she was like, yeah, it's vibrant. There's a good party vibe there and all this kind of stuff. And look, I'm 40, I'm 45, I'm turning 46. And so, my party days are not at what they used to be. My party days consist of me coming home at 11:30 and having a great night's sleep and getting up early to do the lawn or do the gardening and stuff like that, or take my kids to soccer or to work or what have you. So my life's a little different, but I get it. Miami's a fun place to go. It's a lot of culture, a lot of great food. It's got some clubs and some fun things to do, right? A lot of sporting events and stuff like that. So I get why people want to go there. And one of the people a lot of the people that I follow have been building houses there right along the coastline. Beautiful, beautiful houses, massive houses. These are mansions. I don't know these people. They're just people I follow online. And I always wonder to myself, why would you want to live there? Why? Why in the world would you want to live in Miami long term? Why would you not only buy a house, but build a house? As you build a house, it's a lot of work. You got to do the design. You got to approve the designs. You got to look at all the little details, where you want the decorations to be, all that kind of stuff. And you build this massive house, you spend a lot of money, and it might not be there in 30 years. It might not be there in 20 years. Who knows? Right? Certain places in the U.S., certain places around the world are succumbing to sea level rise in ways that we didn't even think would happen. And over in New York, near Long Island, we're starting to see sort of the sea level has risen over the past century by a foot and is predicted to be a foot and a half over the next century, which could put most of the Hamptons underwater, which is a beautiful place in New York that a lot of people who have a lot of money build houses and enjoy the time during the summer. The Hampton is probably one of the most prestigious places to be in the summer. But it's not going to be prestigious if you can't live there because there's water everywhere, right? In Miami, on the other hand, Miami-Dade County, I covered this on an article a few weeks ago where the water is rising through the ground. Like the water table's rising. In the U.S., you don't have basements, or in Miami anyway, or Florida, you don't have basements because the ground is so wet at the bottom. It's not conducive to basements, just like it up here in Canada and maybe in the U.S. So, the water rises, it's rising through the ground, and it's going to flood that way. It's not necessarily going to be what you think and coming in from the ocean. During storm events and stuff like that, it will, but it'll have a harder time dissipating through the ground because the water table is so high already. So we're going to see flooding, but not in the way that we're thinking. But up here in New York City, well, I say up here, I'm in the north, but I'm further north than that. Down there in New York City and Long Island and New York State, there are places where, you're going to see flooding. And especially when you have, things like Superstorm Sandy, that caused significant flooding all the way into New York City. So they're saying here it's about next 25 years, so it's going to raise another 13 to 25 inches, about 1 to 2 feet over the next 25 years, and by as much as 69 inches, nearly 6 feet by 2100. So while it may seem far into the future, it's actually not. Many of the people who are alive today will see the turn of the century into 2100. So look, this is kind of crazy. It says, one of the Newsday quotes of this article that I'm watching, I'll link to it in the show notes. While optimists say Long Island is not going to sink under the waves anytime soon, climate scientists warn that preparations have been too sluggish. So in other words, when you have these types of events, superstorms and hurricane seasons that are getting worse and worse, you're going to start seeing changes happen faster and faster. We're already seeing changes happen faster than we thought. I remember hearing these predictions and the predictions that we're seeing now, like the wildfires and things like that. I heard in the hurricane season, I heard that back in the 2000s, early 2000s. When I had graduated, I was starting to talk to more people within the marine space and the climate space, and we started to get more information on it. And you're like, oh my gosh, this is kind of scary. That's not going to happen 20 years from now. And what happens? Last year in Canada, the boreal forest was on fire across Canada. Many people were displaced from their homes. Many people lost their homes. More than enough died. I mean, more than what we wanted, right? One is too many, and more than that died. And we was constant back and forth. We saw flooding, we saw droughts, we saw everything. And then the temperatures are actually getting worse because it's an El Nino year. Now, some skeptics say, well, it's an El Nino year, so when La Nina comes in, it'll cool off and we're going to see a decrease. I hope so. Honest to God, I hope so. Because if we keep raising the temperature as we're doing now and continue to hit record temperatures, that's not going to be good. And the last time we had a La Nina to La Nina switch, the temperatures didn't really go down that significantly. And it continues to rise to this day. So here's the problem, right? We have sea level rise, we have flooding, we have increased, climate change problems, these consequences that continue to happen, droughts, wildfires, flooding, all that kind of stuff. How do we adapt to it in the meantime while we're trying to reduce things? And, it's kind of funny because some of the communities in Long Island have actually changed some of their infrastructure. So they're having more climate resilient architecture and infrastructure. So one developer even created a house that could float, believe it or not. And it would return to its original spot unharmed after the floodwaters have receded. So imagine that your place around your house floods, your house ends up floating, and then it goes somewhere, and then you can bring it back to where you want. I don't know if that's exactly how it works, but that's pretty cool. But the problem is not everybody can afford that. So the people in the Hamptons who are rich and the people in Miami who are rich, who can afford to move, they may not be able to sell their house, but they might be like, I can take a loss on this house and I can go move somewhere else. But what about the people who can't move? What about the people who expect to sell their house and that's their nest egg for retirement, but they can't sell their house because nobody's going to buy a house that's surrounded by water? And surrounded by water. Water's flooding into it. It's not even just surrounded. It's actually engulfed in water. So you can't sell your house. So all that money you've been saving with real estate, because when you're younger, they're saying, yeah, invest in real estate, even in your own home. You won't be able to sell that house because nobody wants to buy a house that's underwater or partly underwater. And so what's going to happen if you can't move? What's going to happen when you can't sell? You're going to have to start all over. You're going to lose that nest egg, which is going to be so devastating. And we know where the places that are more vulnerable, they're not moving fast enough. They're too sluggish in how they adapt and how they change. And that might require changing the architecture plans of future houses. That might be designing roadways differently, moving roadways, raising roadways, right? There's going to be a lot of different things. Who knows? We might be using boats like Venice a lot more. I have no idea. But in this article in the cooldown.com, they talk about we must move away from planet overheating, air polluting energy sources that are driving global temperatures. rising global temperatures, such as oil, gas, and oil. Instead, we must turn to clean, renewable energy sources like wind or solar. So, a few ways to reduce your personal air pollution. That would be switching to an electric car when you can. They are coming down in price, which is nice. Buying food that is grown locally, which is always great. You're supporting local farmers. And then supporting brands that are investing in eco-friendly initiatives. So just like last week when I interviewed Veronica Mikos, she was talking about how Hyundai is actually helping them take away nets. And they're using the nets, the filaments of that net, in their mats, their car mats. So they're helping clean up the ocean and protect the ocean. And then they're using that product to sell for their like in a sustainable way for their car mats, which I think is a great way of doing things. You know, there's lots of different ways that you can live and lead. And just like last episode when I talked about, there's lots of ways that you can join community groups. You know, you can join, political committees that are either local, federal, or even state and provincial. So there's lots of ways that you can help. There's lots of ways that you can share your voice, just like I talked about last episode. Go listen to that last episode if you missed it. You'll want to hear it. It's just we need to move on this. We need to move on this quickly, like faster than we are now, like way faster, like double, maybe triple, quadruple the speed, because we're not moving fast enough. And, there are people who are denying it. There are politicians who are in power who are knowing that this is a problem. They don't care. They want power. They want money. That's what they have. That's what they want to keep. And to keep power, you got to make friends with the people and continue to keep the people that are happy, that are actually supporting you to get into politics. Imagine if you took the money out of politics, what politics would be like. That would be very interesting. Maybe more bribes. I don't know. But I think there's bribes anyway now. When you get a campaign donation from a company, that company is going to expect something in return when you get into power. There's a reason why that company is supporting you. It's not just because of your values as a politician. It's because of what you can do when you have the power. And if you get enough of those people, or a whole party, then you can really do some damage and make more and more money. Because that's what seems to be happening in politics all over the world. Not just Canada, not just US, not the Western world, but all over the place. And that's a shame. That's a real shame. Like allowing greed to take over so much so that we're destroying the lives of people and we're destroying the planet. And that is a big problem. So I know this was the best, most positive follow-up to yesterday's episode, but there's ways that you can help, and I just went through them. And so, continue to do that. When you hear good news, help more. When you hear bad news, help more. Right? That's what we gotta look at it. You got to make sure that we are doing everything we can, as an individual, as a community member, as a citizen, to ensure that we are doing our part to continue the fight against climate change, to reduce climate change, and to continue the fight to protect the ocean. Because that's what we need to do. Every second breath comes from the ocean. A lot of our food comes from the ocean, especially globally. So let's smarten up and let's get going and let's protect the ocean. Let's reduce climate change. Do what you can. Love to hear your thoughts on what you do to reduce your footprint on climate change and on the planet. You can hit me up at How to Protect the Ocean on Instagram. You can also sign up for our newsletter that we release 5 days a week, where you'll get a summary of this episode as well as all of our other episodes and other podcast shows in our network. All you have to do is go to speakupforblue.com/newsletter. And then, of course, if you want to join the community in July on an app that I'm actually creating, you can sign up to speakupforblue.com/ocean app. That's all one word, APP at the end. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode of the How to Protect the Ocean podcast. Have a great day. We'll talk to you next time, and happy conservation.